And welcome back. Right here on TV, uncensored, every other Friday, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You know, I didn't really believe terraforming. I mean, I knew there were geoengineering programs going on, and, you know, the way we've tilled the land over hundreds of millions of acres to produce the crops that we enjoy for our food on the planet. You know, I get that. But in terms of terraforming, as in a different species coming in to change the planet's composition for something later down the timeline, I never really believed in that. But after seeing what this just turned into, I'm starting to gravitate towards something's very, very wrong here. So as we look at today's information, it seems that the deforestation and the actual purposeful cutting of trees across the entire planet to then bury them underground and use the byproducts, which are going to use an enormous amount of electricity, which I don't know where they're going to get the electricity to do all these processes. But you're taking the carbon out of the trees in some processes, like biomass gasification or liquefaction for oils, like they did in Germany, and they took coal and they processed it into liquid oils. That sort of thing. Turn it into a basalt-ish type of rock, limestone, and then spread it over tens of millions, if not a full 100 million acres of farm fields across the United States and other places in the world. That terraforms, that changes the chemical composition of soils. And also tearing down our forests and really a straight breath with no smile saying, yeah, we need to remove all the forests because once the trees fall down, they create too much CO2. So if we can stop that, they want to do some sort of balance where each year if humans are going to put CO2 in the atmosphere, they're going to cut that much forest and bury it underground to try to make an offset of carbon that would be released as the trees break down. And I'm thinking, whoa, 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 whoa. That is terraforming. That is not human thinking about doing this type of programs for humanity. And I know it might sound a little woo-woo, but please allow me to introduce this information. It so was shocking for me to even read such things. I had to step back a couple times and shake my head. That's impossible. Really, that's impossible. So, you know, with the amount of information and researching that I do, and to get a that's impossible out of me is like, it's got to be a pretty high on the scale of things I've seen or researched over the last decade plus. So I'm going to start you here. And this Forbes magazine was the one who broke the story. So all, you know, tracebacks go to Forbes magazine. And then subsequent business publications picked it up and started running with it. This is not like a before it's news or Babylon Bee kind of thing. This is from Forbes. And the amount of companies involved in this is staggering. And also this Ponzi scheme called carbon credits is also intertwined with it. You knew it would be, because that's where the cash cow is, no pun intended, with no grazing. Chop down forests to save the planet. Maybe not as crazy as it sounds. That's absolutely crazier than it sounds. That's actually insanity. That's a textbook definition of insanity, to cut the world's forest down, to try to save the planet like that. Those two don't go together in a normal sentence. So what they're looking at now is they're understanding that going to a chemical process in a factory like ethanol, for example, well, that's kind of an easy one because the CO2 is what's coming off the alcohol production. That's pretty easy to capture that. But when you come into electrical plants, once you get all of these different types of particulates coming out and just trying to pull one band of CO2 out of all the smoke coming out of the stacks after the scrubbers, etc., that's a much more difficult process. Same with steel smelting, any types of refining of metals, etc. You know, once you get into these multi-chemical releases, you know, you're going to have to pinpoint that CO2, pull it out. Very costly. But that's what they've been going and gravitating toward, is carbon underground sequestration after they pull the CO2 out of chemical processes across all of our industries right now. But this one takes it to kind of a new level here, sequestering trees underground. Jerome Powell and the Fed raised rates for the 11th time in July. The Hill warned it's a mistake that could spark a recession. Economists believe this is the last rate hike in the most aggressive rate hike cycle in history. Rate hikes are typically headwinds for gold. Meanwhile, gold has gone up over 20% since 2022. Imagine where gold and silver are going to go when the Fed stops raising and starts cutting. Call the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Patriot Gold Group has the no fee for life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver on qualifying rollovers. Give them a call, 888-546-7020. And now on with the video. Now, some of them will be dead or deadfall, but a lion's share is going to be, they are going to pick the trees, cut them at the bottom, at the ground level, stack them up, and then bury them somewhere. And you will be paying for that with your carbon offset credit and the new global taxes on food and anything you consume if it continues down this road. I think we put a few speed bumps out myself. That's why I'm bringing you the information. Now, the biomass burial, that's what they're calling it. There's many other types of coin terms we'll go through the presentation here, but provide a relatively cheap and easy way to pull down some share of the billions of tons of greenhouse gases. So again, it all comes down to, this is a fully natural process. Tree grows, tree dies in the forest, tree decomposes, leaves biomass, life for the rest of the ecosystem in the forest. See, that's going to be disrupted as well. So you're looking at all these disruptions and I'm thinking, wow, you're taking down the base level of life at that microbial level in the forest even. That's terraforming. That's not human. Trying to remove the base microbial level of growth in a forest itself, and then byproducts from this maniacal, whatever you call it here, biomass burial to spread things on our crop fields that are also going to impact our food and food production levels. It just, so the article focuses on this company here, Kodama, and I would call Kodonta, but that's just me. Systems, they all have this same, you know, as I was going through and doing all the research, they all have the same kind of generic site. They'll put up a nice logo. They'll say, hey, we're doing these projects, click here to learn more. And they always have like cartoonish graphics that just, you look at that, it's a professional company, what? So Yale Carbon Containment Lab is one of the facilities they're working with, and they take these little round bits of wood and they try to break it down and see how long it'll break down and how much carbon coming off that piece of wood can be sequestered. And they'll try to do an analysis on, you know, how many millions of trees that were cut down and then how much CO2 that saved. And then those companies will get paid that money after you pay it first in the carbon tax on all the things you'll buy in the future. It ain't coming from the government's coffers anywhere. It's coming from your and my pocket, being stolen from our pockets. A Ponzi scheme, nothing less. So what they want to do, the whole concept is slowing or halting to zero any kind of decomposition of wood in the forests. So what they propose is, now get this list is kind of long here, wood burial, which is they dig a big pit and then they line it with some sort of liner. Oh, gee, you need petrochemicals for that. You need factories to make that. You need delivery systems to get it there. So, I mean, it's just like really, you're making more processes to get the final product into the ground than you actually saved. It's just a, like I say, a Ponzi scheme here. Submersion, it means they're going to put it underwater somewhere. Now, how many assessments do you have to have if you want to, you know, clear out the back 2 acres of your property in some states? You have to get an environmental assessment done. Well, they're talking about cutting millions of trees and then weighting them down and putting them underwater so they don't decompose. If you've ever seen those Discovery Channel shows where they're, you know, with the underwater chainsaws getting the wood from the last 100 and 150 years when America dammed up an enormous amount of valleys and forests were submerged, that wood's still good. It's even better because the trees were larger and it's really, you know, gotten very hard over those last century or so. They want to do the same thing. And I bet in 150 years, there'll be a whole program to bring that out from underwater and sell those trees. Above ground suspension, that's a kind of unknown. The physical encasement using limestone washing. I mean, there's a huge amount of processes involved in even getting these trees to where they need to be to sequester the CO2. And anybody that knows anything about CO2, it expands, does it not? So for them to say, we have a fully contained system, we're going to drop 6 million trees in there and we're going to lock it up tight and then that CO2 won't go anywhere. Okay. Sure it won't. So this is the idea moving forward here. And again, and guess who's the main investor in this? I'm not making it up. The main investor, Bill Gates. Hitting 3 birds with 1 stone. Decreasing the microbial life across the forest floor and the very entry of what would be fields and our full ecosystem for nature in the forest, degrading that and diminishing it by multi-%. And it just goes on and on with the deforestation, and then, throw in all this extra detritus off their processes out into our farm fields. There's a great book called Sludge is Good for You. It was written in the 1950s, and it talked then in the 1950s how companies were making such hazardous byproducts or products, and they had hazardous byproducts that they needed to get rid of. So they would pay city councils to then go put this stuff on their roadways and just dump it out in the farm fields as dust, as fertilizer. But it was really toxic sludge. And that's what the whole book was about. It's called Sludge is Good for You. I encourage you to read it. It's a real fast read. It's only like 100 and some pages, but man, it just hit home. If that was going on in the 1950s, then what was going on today? Oh, we're starting to see it. So investors like Kodama Systems are trying to reduce air by chopping down and burying trees. Carbon tax credits only if Uncle Sam gets on board. Oh, wait, they already did. Remember, we talked about the carbon pricing probably about a month ago when they were looking for $85 a ton for underground sequestration this year. So you're looking probably around $60 a ton to $50 a ton for this underground wood pulp or wood storage thing. And they're talking about hundreds of thousands of tons in the projects per company. So you're talking at least $5-6 million in revenue on a reoccurring basis. So once the first initial install is done, and you say, all right, we'll put this many trees under there, 110,000 tons of CO2 sequestered per year, boom, that's just rolling revenue. Then they're going to offset it for the dudes who want to drive around in their private airplanes. Well, I can buy an offset credit and still continue my lavish lifestyle. So again, these other investors, and Forbes bringing it out for Kodama, forest management company. And here's the whole thing about the headline, which really grabbed my attention, was a stealth effort to bury the trees. Now, see, this original article in MIT Technology Review was published in December 15th of 2022. Now, see, I could see why they want to have it stealth and why they want to hide the information from the public. You're telling me with a straight face you want to cut down our forests and bury them, and then we need to pay you to do that. And then you get recurring revenue for every ton that's sequestered. Okay. I could see why they put it under, as long as that they knew it was going to come to the surface eventually. But look how much time they bought, 9 or 10 months of your awareness of this, to get out in front of it and stop it. Because if this information had been known 9 months ago, we would not be anywhere close to where these companies are now, springing up like, mushrooms after a spring rain. So $6.6 million. I'm surprised it's not 6.66, to be honest with you, the way they do all these news feeds. So Bill Gates Climate Fund, Breakthrough Energy Ventures, as well as Congruent Ventures and other investors are the mains into this, cut the trees and bury them. They're calling it a wood vault, is another term that you might hear for this, wood vault. Keep your ears out for this one, because they're going to try to lexicon you into spinning your head and going in a circle. You've seen I've already dropped at least 5 terms of the same exact technology, and that's what they're going to do, is just keep spinning you in circles. So once you lock onto something, oh, it changed again. Oh, it changed again. Or you'll be spinning around looking for it, and there's so many words and terms for it that it'll be confusing. And that's the way I see these newest kind of plans unveiled. We talked about the pipelines for CO2 sequestration, and just the names overlapping in the regions. It's confusing unless you really sit down for hours and hours and hours and dig through the research, because the Colonial Pipeline, okay, and then all these other ones laid on top of each other and on top of each other. It's the same with this wood vaulting. So what they want to try to do is keep out oxygen and water that would accelerate decomposition. And then that prevents the greenhouses from leaking out. So I want to know, once they encapsulate this, if there is a leak and the CO2 leaks out, do they get their CO2 sequestration carbon credits revoked at that point? Then they have to refund because the CO2 is now escaping out of their underground facility. I doubt it. Once in, those funds will never come out. And like I say, this is such a Ponzi scheme. So what they want to do now is use a regular oil-based petrochemical process to create geotextile liners by hundreds of square miles to be able to encapsulate all of these trees. Now, it's not going to be 100 square miles in one area, but the way that it looks, they're talking like 5-10 acres at one go to fill it in, and then the next one, and just going to make grids out of it as they deforest. So I saw one, which I'll bring you here. They deforest, and then right next to the logging operation is going to be a burial pit, and then they just go on deforest, burial pit, deforest, burial pit in a grid pattern, just stripping the forests. So for me, that's engineering our planet. You're reducing the oxygen content, you're removing a natural biome from it. So that is getting the planet ready for something else to come in and live on it. As hard as that is for me to believe, I really never thought that until I just saw this stuff today. And now I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Something's very wrong here with this. Like when I was a kid, you were supposed to plant a tree to save the planet. Now they're at the point of cutting the trees down. So, you know, how does this whole flip-flop from one generation to another occur? And here, off of these investment websites, this is the best they can do with their graphics. So I'm saying it's always like a cookie cutter type of website that leads you into these investment things for carbon sequestration, whatever form it takes. It's always these really kindergartenish kind of graphics. They never have anything of real substance in there for you to look at. Now, if you're asking me for millions of dollars and this is what you have in your slide deck as the graphic for the sequestration wood vault cell soil cover area, I might be scratching my head a little bit. Look how they have a cow over there on the left, solar panels on it. And then they have, this is what's the craziest thing. On the right side, they have a dude riding a mountain bike, but then they have a tree on top of the sequestration where they just cut down all the trees. So you're telling me that then they want to reforest over the top of what they just cut down, and they're going to ask for government grants to do that. So I'll say that again. They're going to cut the forest that you physically see in front of you, buried underground with some sort of geopolymer lining. Excuse me. Once it's covered, then they're going to go put soil on top of it and then reforest that soil. Yeah. That's what we're looking at. Let me get this slide. There we go. So if the biomass burial works, it might provide a relatively cheap and easy way to pull down some of the share of the billions of tons of greenhouses gases. Again, it's all about the ROI on these projects. An ROI on an ethanol production facility to scrape that CO2 out of that process, that's pretty much the only thing that comes out of it as it's fermenting. That's an easy one to compress and run down a pipeline. When you get into the more expensive ones, you know, at power plants, steel mills, smelters, etc., that ROI is just blown out of the water because it takes so much input to get that actual CO2 out of that whole process. So they're looking at a really easy way to do it. So if I cut down a tree, it won't decompose. I just save the world. Okay, so you're going to need a bunch of chainsaws, which are running off petrol. You'll need a huge amount of machinery because you know how heavy trees are? And I say this really just like as a safety thing. If you never sawed trees before, if you've never been around down trees, and like I have a farm, so we're always cutting trees. Something's always falling after storms. The weight of the trees it's shocking how heavy a tree can weigh. Even a branch will kill you, let alone a whole tree. You're going to need grapples and you're going to need, you know, fossil fuel driven machinery. I mean, not double or triple the amount of machinery for projects like this. We're talking like 10x more forestry gear than currently out there to facilitate these projects. And they're all fossil fuel run. And all the polymers for their liners are all made out of oil. So it's just kind of an easy scam to jump in, cut a few trees, throw them underground, all while using the traditional fossil fuel system, which I thought if we were going away from that, why would you make that the centerpiece of your new carbon sequestration is to use fossil fuel to the uber max because you can't move that weight. And I can't see out there like the Amish with the sawtooth, two-man saw going back and forth. I have one of those. They're hard to use. It's a skill. It's a learning curve on how to get that thing to cut straight because most times it'll come off at an angle like that. Just from experience, handles break all the time. So this is the test from Yale here. So what they did is they have these little wood cubes and they put them in like little chicken wire cages and they leave them outside and they see how long it takes for them to break down. This is off the investor website also. So this is their test project here You should be just so impressed that they have this size of wood that they're testing for the breakdown in materials. Wow. Where can I sign up, do you think? So again, investor, there's a slide deck here. They're trying to show the decomposition, and they're going to box up the wood or put it underground, atmospheric CO2. So the carbon natural cycle is in near balance in an established forest. Trees absorb huge, can I say it again, huge quantities of CO2. Hey, so do our plants. That's called plant food. They need it. The less CO2 we have in our atmosphere, the more the plants are going to struggle. The lower the crop yields will go, and the smaller our forests will continue to get. Plants need CO2 to grow. Now, once they die, they decay and release carbon back into the atmosphere. So another key term you're looking for here, WHS, wood harvest storage. Again, they're going to inundate with, that's like the 6th term I've used so far to describe the same process. So again, this whole subterranean storage, I don't know how we're going to do it. The wood vault, the engineering that's going to be involved in this, like how many backhoes are going to be involved using fossil fuel to dig out the holes, along with all the grappling machinery and forestry machinery that'll need to get in there, with the trucks to bring the crews in. I mean, it's going to take an army of people to go in and cut down the forest in mass that they anticipate to generate billions of dollars of sequestering trees underground. So the burial costs. So there's a few startups which we're going to look at when we come back from the break here. You might think there's 1 or 2. There's about 15 of them. They all have a slightly different process, which I'll run through for you. But it all involves, once they do that, either re-injecting it underground into the aquifers, the geologic formations, or like in Sludge is Good for You in the 1950s, throwing it all over our farm fields across the world. I can't see how that's going to be healthy for anybody. But the Australian company, Inner Earth people, I didn't mean to insult you there. Hollow Earth people, my bad. This is Inter Earth. Believes that allowing trees to soak up salty groundwater before burying them will pickle it. Okay, so you're going to have to scrape it from the forest, bring it on trucks to a saltwater place, put it in the water, contaminate the water, let that run off somewhere, pick the same trees up heavier, put it back on a truck, and run them over to your facility where you're going to store them underground. That sounds so efficient to me. That is going to sequester so much CO2. We'll be back after the break.